World Elder Abuse Awareness Week is June 8th through the 15th. What does that mean to you? What's going on in our area? Find out more about the local events and the growing safety concerns for our elderly and vulnerable adults coming up next on Connecting Our Community. Hi, I'm Pat Shoemaker. Welcome to Connecting Our Community. A recent study found that for every case of elder abuse that was reported, there are at least 44 more that were not reported. Tonight's program is focusing on bringing some understanding and information to you about this growing concern in all of our communities. We have with us two members of the Elder Abuse Task Force. Our first guest is Bonnie Clem. She's a supervisor with the Adult Protective Services in Montgomery County. And our second guest is Eileen Bennett, the program manager for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. On the second half of the show, we'll be joined by Debbie Feinstein, Esquire, Director of the Family Violence Unit, and Sergeant Jordan Satinsky, a detective with the Montgomery County Police Department. But let's start with some definitions and some understanding, hopefully, of the basics. Bonnie, vulnerable and elderly, that's a new term I hadn't ever heard before. What does that mean?
Well, actually, we determine what vulnerable means as far as an older person. And vulnerable in our area means 18 years up to however much. And we often go up to 100 and 104 and 103. Wow. So we see people who are living long lives, which is one of the factors right now. Vulnerable means that this person is unable to deal with their own daily needs. And that the person, the vulnerable adult, is someone who doesn't know how to make a plan for themselves and doesn't know how to go through with it. And sometimes vulnerable means someone who can't get out of the way quickly enough to protect themselves if someone's coming after them. And that's the basis for a vulnerable adult.
So you said between the ages of 18, really?
We start from 18 because we do have disabled people who are always in this particular area as well.
So from the age of 18, is there a difference in the way that you would treat somebody who's 18 up to 50 or 60, or is everyone treated the same with the same ground rules, so to speak?
Well, we investigate, and our basic concept of what we need to do is to make sure that these people who are 18, now these are not 18-year-old strong people or people who are doing well. These are people who have disabilities of some type, which creates a problem for their safety. And so basically we do almost the same thing with everyone, except that we treat people differently depending on what their lifestyle is and what they're doing in their life.
Yeah. And Eileen, you're an ombudsman.
I
so
am.
Where do you fit in, and tell us what an ombudsman would do?
Well, first of all, you got the word correct, so thank you. Ombudsman is a Swedish term for citizens advocate. And we are a combination of advocacy and investigation and work with residents that are in licensed assisted living facilities and nursing home settings.
So the difference would be that you would only deal with people in licensed care, whereas Bonnie, your organization would deal with people in their own private homes?
We basically see people who are in what we call the community. And sometimes that includes facilities like group homes. We still work in that. We consider that the community. And some of the assisted living facilities, we consider the community as well.
And so have you seen an uprise, an increase in the numbers? I know that there's a big campaign now saying that Maryland has terrible ratings in terms of elderly care facilities, nursing homes, et cetera, that abuse is horrible. Have you seen a rise in that? And
well, there's certainly in long-term care settings, first of all, a rise in the number of settings. So we have many more long-term care settings than we had when I came into this work 25 years ago. There is also an explosion in the increasingly older population that needs assistance and care. And the caregivers are paid caregivers in a licensed environment. Whereas in a home environment, it could be a paid caregiver as well as family caregivers who are getting frustrated with all that's necessary, and they go beyond what they need to keep their cool, literally. As well as there are people who are criminals who are out to take advantage of individuals no matter what setting they're in. And I think that the word vulnerable is applicable to everybody. Any one of us could be vulnerable at any time. It's just whether or not you have the wherewithal to be able to deal with the aftermath too, whether it's financial or physical.
Yeah. And Bonnie, have you seen a rise in the number of cases in private settings?
Well, actually, we have seen a rise. Adult Protective Services has seen a major rise in the cases that are coming into us. However, I wonder if it's not the fact that we're going into the community and trying to educate the community on the fact that it's not a terrible thing to report to Adult Protective Services. It's a good thing because we're going to do our very best to try and make things better.
And that was going to be my next question. Do you think that it really is happening more, or just that people are more aware of it and more concerned and more comfortable with the reporting of incidents? Is there any way to know?
There's certainly research that proves that it is happening more, but it's also the ability to use all kinds of media to get the word out, to remember that it's okay to dial 911 in an emergency, but it's also okay to dial 311 when I want to call somebody and find out, is this something I need to tell somebody?
Well, now that's something that I had never heard of. Maybe I just haven't been aware, but there's a 311 that you can call?
Montgomery County does have a 311 service which will take a general call from the public and then direct it to the appropriate program. So you might not realize that you want to talk to the Ombudsman versus the Adult Protective Services group. However, if you were to call 311 and say, I'm living at home and my son has just written a $10,000 check on my checkbook, they'll know that call would go to Adult Protective Services, as compared to saying, my son has come in and written a $10,000 check out of my checkbook and I'm in a nursing home. They would be sending that to the Ombudsman program.
And is this a 24-hour day?
It's a 24-hour day. Our lines are open 24 hours, 7 days a week.
That's great. And so people who answer those lines are trained to know the difference if you need to go, to home or community. But what about if you don't know what's going on? So what should somebody be looking for before making the phone call?
What we often tell people is that if they're concerned about their neighbor, their family, whatever the situation is, it's not their need to investigate themselves. It's our job. It's our job, if we think a case is serious and that we need to work with the person that they're trying to report, and we're trying to tell people this is not a bad thing, this is a good thing. It's good to report.
Well, it is in terms of the overall picture, but let's say I live across the street from someone, I see her go out to get her mail occasionally, and I notice that maybe today she's hobbling. She didn't limp before. Is that something that I should report? Or, where do you draw the line between reporting everybody every day?
Right. Well, in Adult Protective Services, we basically investigate abuse, neglect, self-neglect, which is something that we do in Montgomery County. It's not, self-neglect is not always investigated in other areas, and financial exploitation, as well as sexual exploitation. And so these are all very specific areas that we're looking at, and there are criteria for all of them. So we can help somebody online, and our intake unit knows how to do that, and our crisis center takes over at night, and they know how to do it. So they know what to be looking for, and they know when to report in to us.
Okay. And I heard somebody say that hoarding was a form of abuse. Can you briefly explain how that
Yeah,
gets
well,
involved?
I have to say that I was queen of hoarding for a while, because we
And I'm the princess.
right. But she's waiting
Yeah.
in line. But the reality is that hoarding is definitely a self-neglect issue, because a person can fall on all sorts of things when everything is in the way. It's a public health problem, but I wouldn't call it an abuse per se, other than saying that we do not insist that somebody leave their house but we try to get them to get to a better situation, and sometimes a gradual situation, because it's best that way. That's the way people want to live. In adult protective services, we basically have the concept that people have the right to make bad decisions. But we
That's a good way
also
to put it.
try to talk them out of some of them, so
Yeah.
we do our very best with
And,
that.
and in care settings, it's the same. Somebody can choose to refuse to have treatment, but they cannot be allowed to take it out on somebody else, on another resident in the facility, on a caregiver who they are now getting agitated with because they're not taking their treatments. But they do have a right to make bad decisions, and that's what the Ombudsman program is always working with, is protecting resident rights and the right to make informed decisions.
Okay. Well, we're almost coming to the break, so we're going to be saying goodbye to you all and bringing in 2 other guests. But I want to thank you both so much. Bonnie and Eileen, you're always so informative, and really, I think the main takeaway would be, if you suspect something, report it. You're doing a good thing, and if it's something that you think is a critical thing, call 911 immediately. If you have a question, we would call 311. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Pat.
We will be right back after our break. Please stay tuned.
It's time to join forces. Get energized and fuel up right. Because starting today, every kid in America has a mission. Bring out the action hero in you. Be part of the greatest action movie ever. The first movie that puts you in the action. Show us how you train and eat like an action hero. Join in at actionheroalliance.com.
Oh, sweetheart. Can I give you a hand?
No thanks, Dad. I got it.
Okay. I'm gonna go fix the lamp in your room.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
The pain will not control us, because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
The forest is a magical place for your whole family, with animals and fun all around. So discover the forest and explore all the wonder that's there. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Connecting Our Community. We've changed guests, as you can see, and we now have Debbie Feinstein, who is from the State's Attorney's Office, and Detective Sergeant Jordan Satinsky of the Montgomery County Police Department. And you both deal with elder abuse in horrible ways. Debbie, what kinds of things do you do through your office?
So the Family Violence Division at the State's Attorney's Office has now, within family violence and within our Special Prosecutions Unit, carved out a special unit called the Crimes Against Seniors and Vulnerable Adults. and that is dedicated exclusively to looking at crimes and to prosecuting crimes that are perpetrated against elder and vulnerable adults. Physical abuse, financial exploitation, sexual abuse, all the things that Bonnie was talking about earlier. Those are the types of things that we look at when they rise to the threshold of criminal activity.
And is there any way, because you hear all these horrible stories about someone who was a caregiver in one state, abused someone, moved to another state, and was able to get a job as a caregiver again, doing more abuse, or whatever the case may be. Is there any way to track people? Is there a national registry? Do you get into any of that?
There's actually not. And there was a time period where we were trying to put through legislation in the General Assembly to have a vulnerable adult abuse registry. But that legislation so far hasn't been successful. But it would be sort of like what you see with the sex offender registry.
Right.
But so far hasn't been successful. So really the person would have to actively check to see if there was anything on case search and if there was a criminal charge and that sort of thing. So unfortunately it's not a great system right now.
Yeah. And so what can you do if you want? Is it if you want to hire someone as a caregiver? Do you do a criminal investigation? How would you do that?
I'm actually going to defer to Jordan.
I think the best avenue to take, there are several public databases you can use, as Debbie mentioned earlier. Maryland Case Search is a trove of information you can use, and you can check within the in-state. Many of the other states in the nation also have that similar system, which you can check and simply Google their name. If they've been arrested for something before, it normally pops up, especially if they have a unique name. And that would be one way to vet the process out. The police department can't, nor do we have the ability to investigate, do background checks on every caregiver. It's not, we couldn't do it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if somebody moves into this area from another state but was never convicted, was never prosecuted, there's no trail anywhere, is there? So what are the chances of pursuing this to getting somebody out of the business? So, what are the hopes if somebody does abuse someone in a caregiving situation? What happens?
So really, as we do our investigations and put together our prosecutions, one of the things we gather when you're looking at someone for criminal activity is history. And history is going to be past jobs, past people that they've worked with. Just because they haven't been convicted of something doesn't mean that an investigator isn't going to be able to find out if there's been prior history. So if we start to see patterns, those are the cases, like Adult Protective Services gets a lot of cases coming in, and the Ombudsman sees cases, but really the repeat offenders, and when people have been given opportunities to remediate and do better, or just to stay away and not do it, they're particularly important for us to make sure that we're addressing criminally and finding them criminally responsible so that there will be a public record of it.
And do you have a high conviction rate? Is there light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, or if somebody wants to bring a conviction against someone, is it really not going to happen? What do you have to do to get somebody convicted of the crime? What kind of reporting, what kind of evidence, what kind of process is it?
Well, so I sort of divide this into two categories, and they also overlap. So there's sort of the physical and sexual abuse side, and then there's the financial exploitation side. And then a lot of times there's a hybrid between the two. And my office and the Montgomery County Police Department do a very good job investigating the cases, and we actually work together as a multidisciplinary team with Adult Protective Services, with the Ombudsman, with the County Attorney's Office, with other agencies, so that we can make sure that we're gathering all of the information, all the players at the table, so that we can share that information. We do that once a month formally, multiple times a month informally, so that we are getting the best information together to have a successful outcome. Now, sometimes a successful outcome may be a prosecution. Sometimes it might be fixing the situation or offering a safety plan or something else to remediate. But we work together to try to come to the best decision and the safest decision and outcome for the elderly or vulnerable adult.
Well, that's really great that everybody seems to work together, but is there something that you see as a police officer being reported more than any other things? Are there certain signs that you seem to know this is going to lead to a bad thing?
What we're seeing is, at least on patrol, we don't get a lot of calls on patrol for this type of crime. It just doesn't happen. People are very reluctant to call 911, and I would ask they do that more often when they suspect anything. My patrol officers out on the street, they are learning how to do this. They're great at figuring stuff out, and they will call me right away if something's going on. Most of our cases actually come through the Family Justice Center and Adult Protective Services. They will call us. They're very good. We have an excellent working relationship, and the Ombudsman's Office, an excellent working relationship. They'll call us. We will start dispatch a detective and start an investigation pretty quickly, and we can start vetting it out. And myself and Debbie's group, our groups are co-located together, so we have an attorney that we can go right to all the time, and we can collaborate, bring our cases together, and pretty much pick a path right away. And we would do all the background on someone to see if they have had issues in the past somewhere else, and that would change directions of cases depending on what it is. A majority of our cases that we see, at least since I've been in this unit, it's only been a little less than a year, are more where you have an educational aspect, where maybe there's somebody who isn't doing what they're supposed to because they don't realize it, which is fine. But they brought us in, they're aware the police know, and that seems to change the direction, and their education's increased, and we don't see them again. But unfortunately, there are lots of cases out there where there is abuse, physical, sexual, and financial, that continues to go on today.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody on the phone the other day about something different, and the subject came up of phone abuse, basically, of everyone, but it seems especially elderly people. You get a phone call, oh, it's your long-lost cousin, I'm stuck in prison in Puerto Rico, or whatever the case may be, and can you send me money, or else they're going to do whatever. Is this on the rise because everybody is so disjointed that you really don't know if your cousin is possibly overseas or someplace in trouble? I mean, is there...
There's all sorts of scams. Unfortunately,
Yes.
the scam that you're describing is one of many. There's all sorts of phishing scams where people try to get identity of elder people by calling them, by a romance type of scam, by establishing an online relationship with someone. And basically the goal of the perpetrator is to get the personal information so that they can then get to their finances. There's also another scam where someone over the phone or over the internet will say, can you do this work at home job for me? I'm going to provide you with all the supplies. You pay me X number of dollars up front to get the supplies, and then I will pay you X number of dollars in return for the work that you do. And unfortunately, these are very common schemes. We see sort of these woodchuck schemes where people come to offer to cut down a low-hanging branch of a tree, and this also needs to be done, and then something else needs to be done, and the cost just escalates and escalates and escalates, and it's really just a scam to draw as much money out of the vulnerable person as they can.
Yeah, and would that be something that would be considered with what you all do? In other words, elderly abuse, vulnerable person abuse, or is that just a scam that you would report?
No, that's absolutely criminal. Absolute financial exploitation. I mean, the scams are something that my office looks at, that the police investigate, and we have in-house investigators that look at that as well.
Yeah. Is there anything on a slightly different, not the financial part, but for a physical or mental abuse or suspicion of it, are there any warning signs? Are there any specifics that people can possibly look for? Oh, if I see this, it might mean this, and I should do this?
One of the things that we see a lot is that you'll have a family member who takes over care for the victim and then starts to retract from society or retract from the family, both the caregiver and the vulnerable adult. And you're taking care of your grandmother, your sister's taking care of your grandmother, and you're trying to call your sister and she's not answering her phone anymore. Or when your grandmother shows up, she has these unexplained bruises or seems to be not with it as she used to be. These are signs that we would look for, that we would say, well, there might be something going on here. And we find when especially the police with APS, when we do these joint investigations, we find that we start to dig, a lot of times what happens is the caregiver, aka our suspect in this case, becomes very aggrandizing everything, saying she's taking or he's taking care of everything they should, and they start filing complaints with the police department saying we're not doing what we should be doing, we should be doing something else, to redirect. We don't fall for the scam, we complete, and we continue to go down the road of the investigation, which has resulted in some very good cases.
Yeah.
And gotten the victims out of harm's way.
That's great. And as I was saying in the last segment, at what point should I, as a citizen, not a family member, just someone maybe who lives next door to someone elderly or vulnerable, or across the street, or whatever, at what point do I, as a citizen, step in?
Let me say, of the cases that I've looked at, when we've gone out, we've done witness canvases, a lot of times people will say, we thought something was going on. I'm going to steal something from the feds. Absolutely. If you see something, say something. call. You can call 911, 311, the non-emergency police number, APS, the ombudsman, anybody. We all connect someplace. Doesn't matter if you're not sure where you're supposed to call. As long as you get it into the county government, one of us will figure it out.
And the last thing, because we're almost at the end of our time, I can't believe it, but the last thing is, as a citizen reporting something, am I anonymous? Am I going to have this come back at me from my neighbor who says, well, I was told that you called on me and reported me, or my cousin, or whatever the case may be?
Reporting sources are anonymous to an extent. So if someone wants their privacy to be protected, then that's certainly something that we make as a goal. Now, if a case were to come to court and go to trial and someone was a witness, that may be a different story. But in terms of the reporting source, that's confidential information that's not shared.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank all four of our guests, Jordan, Debbie, Eileen, and Bonnie. If you know someone or suspect someone is in immediate danger, call 911. If you want to report something, there's the 311 number. You can call 240-777-3000 24 hours a day. There are a lot of ways to report this. Don't feel that you're stepping on someone's toes, no pun intended there, but report it, be aware for yourself and for your neighbors. Remember that World Elder Abuse Awareness Week is June 8th through the 15th. This year's senior safety events will take place on June 11th at two separate locations, the Rockville Senior Center from 10 until noon and Holiday Park Senior Center from 1 until 3. You can also go to the Connecting Our Community blog on the mymcmedia.org website. I want to thank our guests again. It's a very important subject. I hope you've learned a lot. I know I have. I want to thank you all for watching Connecting Our Community, and please join us next time. Thank you.